Richard Nixon thought Johnny Cash might be useful. That is the bluntest way to say it. By 1970, Johnny Cash was one of the most recognizable men in America. He had country credibility, moral authority, a working-class image, and an audience that stretched far beyond Nashville. To the White House, that mattered. Because Nixon did not just want artists around him. He wanted symbols. And Johnny Cash, at first glance, looked like the perfect one. Southern, patriotic, deeply identified with traditional America. But that was the mistake. People who did not listen carefully to Johnny Cash often assumed they already understood him. They saw the black clothes, the rural roots, the country audience, and thought they knew exactly where he stood. But Cash was never that simple. He cared about prisoners. He cared about the poor. He cared about Native Americans. He cared about people left outside the frame of respectable politics. And by 1970, he was also paying close attention to the widening distance between the government and young people in America. That spring, Johnny Cash was invited to perform at the White House. The visit would become one of the clearest examples of what made him different from the image people tried to place on him. According to later accounts from people around the event, Nixon hoped Cash would perform songs like Okie from Muskogee and Welfare Cadillac, songs that could be heard as cultural signals, songs that fit the White House mood. But if that was the expectation, Johnny Cash did not accept it. He was not there to become somebody else's political mascot. That is the heart of this story. Cash walked into one of the most symbolic rooms in America and refused to surrender the thing that made him Johnny Cash in the first place: his independence. The room itself matters here. A White House performance is not just another concert. It is choreography, power, symbolism, and image, all arranged to flatter the presidency. And yet Johnny Cash stepped into that setting and remained stubbornly himself. That was not a small thing in 1970. America was split. Vietnam, youth unrest, cultural panic. The old America and the new America were staring at each other across a widening crack. And Johnny Cash, standing in black inside the White House, understood that crack better than most politicians did. What Cash chose to sing matters as much as what he refused. Because he did not simply say no, he answered with songs. One of the most important was, "What is Truth?" That title alone tells you everything about why this story still matters. What is Truth was not a safe song for that room. It was not openly radical, but it was morally sharp. It asked older America to listen to the young instead of dismissing them. It challenged the easy habit of treating youth as the problem instead of asking what they were trying to say. That was not the kind of message many people expected from Johnny Cash. And it was certainly not the kind of message a president automatically expects when he invites a country star into the White House. Cash also performed the Ballad of Ira Hayes. That choice mattered just as much, maybe more. Ira Hayes was a Pima Marine and one of the men who raised the flag at Iwo Jima. He became a national symbol, then returned home to neglect, racism, and despair. In other words, Johnny Cash stood inside the White House and sang a song about the way America uses heroes and forgets them. That is not rebellion in the cartoon sense. It is something more dangerous. conscience. Cash was not shouting. He was not grandstanding. He was doing something harder. He was using the invitation without being used by it. That is why this moment has lasted. Johnny Cash could stand in the most polished, ceremonial room in the country and still sing about people the room would rather not think about. Prisoners, poor people, young dissenters, forgotten soldiers. And he could do it without losing his authority. In fact, that was his authority. Nixon, like many others, had mistaken Cash's surface for his center. He saw country respectability. He did not fully understand the moral stubbornness underneath it. Cash's patriotism was real. So was his Christianity. So was his conservatism in certain parts of life. But none of that made him obedient. And that is the difference. Johnny Cash did not believe loyalty meant silence. He did not believe respect for America meant pretending America was innocent. He believed songs should tell the truth, especially in rooms built for comfort and ceremony. That is why the White House story works so well on video today. It gives people a version of Johnny Cash they recognize, and then breaks the easy version open. He was not a protest singer in the usual mold. He was not a neat partisan icon either. He was harder than that. More American than either side knew how to package. That is also why this moment helped define his later legacy. Long before Hurt, long before late life canonization, long before younger audiences rediscovered him as a mythic elder, Johnny Cash had already shown, in public, that he could enter the center of power and still keep hold of his own conscience. That is rare. Many artists love access. Many love prestige. Many slowly become flatter versions of themselves once institutions begin to honor them. Cash did not flatten. He stayed difficult. He stayed morally unpredictable in the best way. And that unpredictability is exactly what keeps him alive for modern audiences. Because even now, people are drawn to artists who refuse to become easy symbols. At the White House, Johnny Cash could have chosen comfort. He could have chosen the expected songs. He could have smiled, played the role, and given the room exactly what it wanted. Instead, he chose songs with edges. Songs that carried inconvenient people into a convenient room. That was the real refusal. Not just refusing a request, refusing reduction. Refusing to become smaller than his own conscience. And that is why this was one of the most important performances of Johnny Cash's life. Not because it was musically his greatest, not because it was the largest crowd, not because it produced a hit, because it revealed character. The White House wanted Johnny Cash, the symbol. What it got was Johnny Cash, the man. And the man, as it turned out, was far more interesting.